Hi, I'm Debbie Georgatos. Welcome to my show, America Can We Talk? Today, we're going to talk about, is some race discrimination okay? The new Carroll ISD board member, Hannah Smith, joins me. And Dallas City Council candidate is a runoff, Barry Warnick, also joins me. And would you like to meet Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene? And of course, I'll tell you why these stories matter to you. Stay tuned.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth. America Can We Talk is sponsored by GC Works, a Dallas-based company performing advanced technology research in the oil and gas industry.
And hello again and welcome to America Can We Talk and to today's First Five. I'm Debbie Georgatos. America is really struggling with, or at least the media makes it appear as though we are really struggling with race relations in America. We have a theory that has now kind of saturated the country, critical race theory, and is being discussed at the highest levels of power down to the local school districts. And our guest will join us in just a moment is going to talk about the discussion ongoing in a lovely area outside of Dallas called South Lake. And this issue of critical race theory made its way into the school board elections and numerous other issues. But before we turn to her, I want to just give you a few little tidbits of the way in which America, or at least America's campuses, are struggling with race relations. And the reason I labeled this segment, Is Some Race Discrimination Okay?, is because we're really watching the most astounding statements come out of individuals who are held in high esteem at universities and colleges that are widely regarded. And these statements are apparently, seemingly, very openly racist. One, Barnard College, a very, very highly respected college in New England. There is a professor there whose name is Ben Philippe, Phillippe, Ben Philippe, who is a Barnard College English instructor, was on a Canadian radio show recently, and he was there to talk about his new book. In his book, one of the things he was questioned about is something he said, and there's a segment of the book called Sure, I'll Be Your Black Friend, which describes, in his book, he describes detonating white people while nearby air vents spew out noxious gas. And he says, this is what this gentleman, this is a black professor at Barnard College, said in the interview, "When this race war hits its crescendo, I'll gather you all into a beautifully decorated room under the pretense of unity. I'll give a speech to civility and all the good times we share. I'll smile as we raise glasses to your good white health while the detonator blinks under the table, knowing the exits are blocked and the air vents filled with gas." He went on to talk about, in this interview, very just grotesque and graphic descriptions of what he would like to do to white people. This is in a book he's written, in an interview he shared, and later, when confronted about it, did not back down at all. And he said, I guess I'm wrestling with the question that, isn't the end result of all this, all-out warfare? Like Game of Thrones style warfare? And what does that look like? And I've lived in that sort of stray thought for a few pages. It was disturbing to write to blah, blah. Point is, this is language that would have caused a professor, in my view, in any university in this country, even 10 years ago, no matter what race they were attacking, to have been terminated immediately, to have the university, burst forth into the world to make sure to denounce those statements, to say that he doesn't speak for us, he doesn't talk for us, this is terrible. But it has become, in this era of critical race theory, and just the intentional division of America along lines of race, this has become kind of okay to say. A similar thing, I could spend the entire show and many more talking with you about examples from the universities. I want to share one more from the University of Florida. So in the University of Florida, they have a anti-white diversity training. Now, they don't really call it anti-white, they call it diversity training. but one student who took the diversity training course there actually shared the information, what he went through in taking this alleged diversity training. I urge you to read this article, by the way. It's on our website at americacanwetalk.org. On the homepage under shows, drop down list of links. You can read this story. Basically, this young person is describing being in college. This is where you go to open your mind and learn to have discussions about all sorts of, the Western civilization, meaning of life, and values and principles. That's what you're supposed to be doing at college, opening your mind, learning to have Western style, debate of ideas. Instead, they are doing indoctrination blatantly along the lines of race, and among the many things a student describes are in this diversity training, being given a series of questions and asked, what is the right thing for this person to do in this situation? And they have examples like someone who is white decides to have a birthday party and for himself, and for the party decides to have it tacos and sombreros, decides to have Mexican food and a Mexican themed birthday party for himself. And then he's confronted by his friend who is of Mexican descent, who says, I think your birthday party is cultural appropriation. It's very offensive to me. I want you to change your party, do something else, I don't know, have hamburgers, I don't know. But the point is, they actually make at a university a lengthy discussion about what is the right way to respond, including telling a white student all the wrong responses, all the things that's not okay to say in response. And there's example after example after example of absurdity, of the idea of not having a normal human communication between two young adults in college, but instead being told what's okay to say, what's okay to think, and what they decide in their wisdom is racism. I could go on and on. The state of Idaho, by the way, state of Idaho has now passed legislation essentially saying they are cutting funding to state-funded colleges and universities that basically have the social justice warrior agenda going at their campus. They're saying we're not going to fund you with taxpayer dollars when you're on this witch hunt of social justice warrior. Last thing I'll share about this, my friend who runs the new organization out of Washington called the Center for Renewing America. He's joined us on the show before, Russ Vogt. His organization is now calling critical race theory, they're simply calling it state-sanctioned racism. We'll be talking much more about this and also share with our listeners, I'm hosting a conference. America Can We Talk is hosting a conference here in Dallas on June 17th about critical race theories. We have stellar speakers from outside of Texas flying in to talk with us all about what critical race theory is really premised on and where it will take us and how it is hurting America's campuses, colleges, and universities. So that's on June 17th. But to wrap up my first five, I want to say it's really important to be able to have these conversations in America as part of the great respect we're supposed to have for the First Amendment, that we can talk about even hard issues like critical race theory, which is, as you might know or might guess from the things I've been saying in the opening, it is being treated as one of the many topics, along with many other topics, that leftists have decided they have decreed truth. They have laid down the law of what truth is, and no one may float an idea that disagrees with them in the slightest. In fact, it's kind of racist to even question critical race theory. But the fact is, this is still America. We still have a First Amendment. And those of us who love our neighbor as ourselves respect everyone, regardless of race, ethnicity, national origin, skin color, and who are committed to the Martin Luther King idea that we are simply going to love our neighbors as ourselves and not judge them by color of skin, but instead by content of character. Those of us who still believe that, we're actually allowed to speak too. And that, my very fine friends, is today's first five. So we had an election. I mentioned to you on Monday this week, we had an election. We had many local elections in the great state of Texas this past Saturday, and some of them got national attention, really big national attention. And one area where this occurred was in a beautiful community called South Lake, not too far from where we are right now. And this was an election that actually ended up involving several people who were to serve on the school board there, several people, city council races. And the reason it got national attention was because there has been a very large and public focus on the issues of whether or not critical race theory agenda should become a part of the public schools. There was a massive initiative by a left-wing organization to try to bring this critical race theory and the leftist social justice mindset into this school district. By the way, one of the most highly ranked school districts in Texas. And there were parents who finally decided to organize and speak up and fight back against this, what was felt by many as just an attempt to really undermine the unity and the health and the camaraderie and the connection among the people in this area of South Lake and the Carroll ISD. So joining us, we have her online. Just a moment, she'll be joining us. She ran for the Carroll ISD Board of Trustees, Place 5. This is my new friend, Hannah Smith. She's an attorney. We actually have several mutual friends. That's how I was so grateful I could connect with her. But she's an attorney by background. She's a mother of, I think it's 4 kids. And she has kids in the school, and she ran for and won this position on the Carroll ISD Board of Trustees, Place 5. And among the many issues that were front and center in this campaign had to do with addressing critical race theory. So without further introduction, I'd like to introduce you to our new friend, Hannah Smith.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad you're available today. I'm just thrilled you're available today. And I know you've been getting a lot of media attention since not normally a national media thing to run for school board, but sure was in your case. So if you would just start with, why did you decide to run for school board?
I'm the mom of 4 dragons. Our logo here in South Lake is the dragon, and all of the schools have the same logo. So I have 4 kids that are in 4 different schools here in South Lake Carroll ISD. And, you know, I've been involved with their schools, you know, volunteering as a PTA member, and I've even been on some of the boards for the Carroll ISD school board, some of the committees like budget and finance and student health. So I've been really involved in the school district. But the end of summer, last fall, a lot of us became very concerned about some things that were happening in our school district. And we banded together and we started investigating. And some of the things we found really deeply troubled us. And so it was because of that and because of my passion to maintain the excellence of our school district that I decided to run, and I won.
Yes, you did win. And actually, I meant to say when I was introducing this topic, I don't have the names and positions of all the people, but there were essentially 5 positions in which it was school board, city council, and maybe even a mayor's race. And the point was, all the people who ran on the platform essentially, we have to stand up and reject this critical race theory agenda in our public schools, won handily, like 70-30. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it was 1 mayor's race, 2 city council races, and 2 school board seats. So you said it correctly.
Okay, so I want to just dive into this. What is the reason that you found the critical race theory agenda that was being proposed for your schools? Why did you find it bothersome?
Well, last August, our school board was presented with a plan that was called the Cultural Competence Action Plan. And it was a 34-page document that outlined all of the different ways the school district wanted to change our curriculum, our teacher training, our teacher review for job performance evaluations, our student clubs, our communications. I mean, it was a comprehensive plan. It was just not about curriculum, but it was about everything about our district. And the real focus of it was to use equity as a lens for everything that we do in our school district. And surprisingly, that word equity was not defined anywhere in the plan, but we could see what would happen with this plan because it's happened all around the country. So, for example, the plan wanted to track and punish microaggressions, which are defined in the plan to be intentional or unintentional offenses that are in the eye of the beholder, so they're completely subjective. The victim gets to decide when they're offended. They would track those and they would punish them. And that, to me, as an attorney, was of serious concern because I think it's really a First Amendment issue. It it blatantly infringes upon free speech. It chills free speech. Nobody knows when they're going to be punished for a microaggression, and so they just stop talking. And that to me was just horrifying, right? Because especially on the issue of race, where we want our kids to be talking about these really sensitive issues, our kids won't talk about them anymore because microaggression tracking would just essentially cut off all conversation. And let me just be really clear about something right from the start. I am not tolerant of any form of discrimination, racial discrimination, ethnic discrimination. I don't want our kids to be harassed. I don't want our kids to be discriminated against, and I don't want them to be bullied. But I do think that we need to go about it in a different way. And that was really what was wrong with the CCAP. It's just that it went about it in a way using critical race theory and equity as a lens to completely change our district. And that was what was really concerning to me.
I am really glad you added that point. I was going to go into, there were, of course, in every, I mean, even years ago when I was in high school, there were always things said that were potentially harmful or insensitive. And I like that schools have become more active in speaking up and encouraging children to speak up, young people to speak up and say, you know, that's not okay to talk that way, or that, you know, this seems offensive to me. To encourage conversation and understanding each other should be part of what, I mean, in the broader scope, Western civilization, freedom of speech, but even teaching children how to function in the real world requires communication. So the microaggression thing you're describing would have had exactly the opposite effect. It would cause kids to think, I better not say anything because I might say something that constitutes a microaggression. So, and actually what you're describing, there was no way under this proposed system for the student who is accused to say, you know, actually I didn't mean that, I didn't mean that to be offensive. Is that correct?
Well, that's the very definition of a microaggression. It doesn't matter if it's intentional or unintentional. What it matters is the impact or the effect on the alleged victim. And so that's what's so troublesome. And there were also some due process concerns as well, because they set up an anonymous reporting system where you could anonymously report this stuff. And so normally under our system of due process in American jurisprudence, you know, you're afforded the right to confront your accuser. You're afforded the right to see the evidence presented against you. You're afforded the right to be able to respond. And there are certain rights under federal law that are due to students when they're accused of things like this. And so it was really problematic from a due process perspective, just that they were essentially adopting a guilty until proven innocent kind of a system.
Yeah, I've talked about due process in this show very often. I'm a lawyer by background also, and it is just integral to the whole idea of a just justice system, that you're told what the charges are, the accusation, you can confront the people who are accusing you, you can bring in your own answers. And I mean, it's shocking this even what got as far as it did. You also mentioned that they stressed the word equity, and I know you know this, but I'd love to have you just say, what's so bad about equity versus equality?
So our American system of law, our culture is based on equality. It's based on equality of opportunity. It's based on this notion of colorblindness. You know, I clerked at the Supreme Court, and every day when I walked into that Supreme Court building, I walked under a statue of Lady Justice, and she's blindfolded. And that symbolism is that there is equal justice under the law for all. It doesn't matter what your skin color is. It doesn't matter what your ethnicity is. It doesn't matter your background or socioeconomic status. And that's what America is built on, is equality. But equity, they're really trying to change the way equity is viewed. Equity should be very similar to equality. It's derived from the same root. It should be a similar definition, but progressive liberals have changed the definition of equity to mean that we don't just look at equality of opportunity, we look at the results. What are the results that we are seeing? And if the results aren't equal, then we have a problem. And so equity really talks about how do we achieve the end result that we want, where everybody comes out in the same place, not whether everybody had the same opportunity. And that's really problematic because, especially in our district, we had a statement in the CCAP itself that specifically said there are no statistically significant differences in student achievement on test scores based on race or ethnicity. So what does that mean? That means that there are no educational inequalities in our district based on race or ethnicity. So we have no educational inequalities based on race that need to be solved by a system of equity. So that was really the problem that I saw with this from the very beginning, is that this was a solution in search of a problem. We didn't have educational inequalities in our city or in our schools, and we didn't need to solve them. You know, we live in a very affluent city. People come here from all over the country because it's such a great place to raise their families. And regardless of your skin color, you get a wonderful education at South Lake Carroll, and we don't need to revamp it in the lens of equity.
I love that answer. I do want to talk about, I know that there was an incident, there have been instances, and probably all over the country, but an incident that had got some attention nationally that involved some students behaving poorly who were part of your school system there. And I'm getting at the point, no one's trying to claim the school is perfect, that there are never students who act out of line, there are never students who say things that are insensitive and truly offensive things. But the question really is, this reaction, and I understand that part of what gave rise to this CCAP was that one incident that seemed to get a lot of national attention. So the question really to you is, so people who are aware of that incident, they want to hear from you, the new school board, and people generally at the school. What is the student supposed to do when they do feel like, if we're not going to go on to this big system that was being proposed, what are they supposed to do when they feel they've been mistreated or spoken to in a racially insensitive manner or the subject of discrimination? How does the school handle that?
So that's a great question, and I have been very clear throughout my campaign that we don't tolerate discrimination, we don't tolerate harassment, we don't tolerate racism. We have a student code of conduct in our district that is over 100 and some pages long. It's really huge, and it has sections in it that deal with freedom from discrimination and harassment and bullying and racism and all of these different provisions that set out the framework for what teachers and administrators need to do when they're confronted with these kinds of situations by their students or by fellow teachers. And so my argument has been from the very beginning is that we have really not consistently applied our student code of conduct. And so this was really an overreaction to that, not fulfilling our duties and applying the student code of conduct. And so we overreacted by saying, well, we need to adopt this new 34-page plan to set everything straight. And my point is simply that, no, we don't need a new plan. We just need a really strong backed administration to really implement and enforce the student code of conduct.
Yeah, related to that, I would say the notion of having students be aware. If you're a student, a minority student at one of your schools, and you feel like either the conduct or words of teacher, fellow students was in some way racist, do the kids know what they're supposed to do? Because that seems like the most obvious answer is make sure kids know we're not saying, too bad, sorry you got offended, and there's nothing to be done about it. We're saying we have an avenue, and here's what it is. So that is a duty, I'm assuming you would agree, on the part of the school to make sure kids all know how to proceed if they do have an issue.
Yes, and that's what I've actually recommended now that I'm on the school board is I want to have extensive trainings for our teachers, our administrators, our parents, and our students so that they understand what is in the student code of conduct and what the expectations are, because we need to hold them to those expectations.
Yeah, absolutely true. And I have to say, I'm sure you know, because of and you don't need to go off on commenting broadly what's happening in America, but there's extreme concern among many people that the critical race theory is being pushed in a way that you can't even, as these stories in my first 5 were making reference to, you can't even respond, you can't even question it. And so you end up with a kind of a totalitarian mindset coming out of universities and schools where the law is laid down, the assessment of America as a deeply racist country, which many people would not agree with, is treated as fact, and everything flowing from what the critical race theory advocates want is assumed to be what must be followed. And I will tell you, there was just cheering around the country to hear that there was a group of parents who banded together and just said, we're not going to let this tear apart our school, because I think everyone, I'd love to have you address, how does a school district like yours, how do you create unity? How do you make more unity? But that's really the critical race theory advocates try to say, you either go along with us or you are agreeing that you accept racism. And those are not the only two choices. You can be opposed to critical race theory and the social justice warrior mindset and still say, I demand I want unity, I want clear communication, I want fairness. There's a better way, and that's, I think, what this parent group that got together really managed to convey to America. I'd love to have you address kind of what the goal was of this parent group that you were part of.
That's a really great point. So last end of August, early September, we did form together as a group, and we said we're going to fight this. And so we started to actually utilize the open records requests in our school district, and we sent a lot of requests for different documents that were referenced in the CCAP. We analyzed them. We used them as the basis for our public comments during board meetings. We sent in emails to the administration and to the board expressing our concern over what we were seeing. And we also just really banded together to inform and enlighten our community at large. The parents of the students were the ones who were really concerned, but there was a larger community that doesn't necessarily have kids left in the district, but they don't want to see our schools go this direction. And so we had to do some broader community engagement and education. And so a lot of these things, were going on all last fall and all last winter. And then in anticipation of the school board election, we had two candidates, myself and Cam Bryan, who was in place 4, step forward and say, we'll run for the school board, because we realized that we had really been asleep. This community had just not been paying attention. And the last 3 members of our school board got on the school board in unopposed races, and they didn't even have to run a campaign against anybody. And so we really realized that if you care about what happens in your school district, you have to be awake and you have to know what's going on and you have to elect the right people to your school board. And so that's what we did.
Hannah Smith, I have to tell you, I am so impressed. First of all, thank you for running, for being brave, because these are the kinds of issues, many times, if you attempt to speak up at all, the slogan slinging done by the people who support critical race theory, who would have the social justice mentality invade every aspect of schooling, education, clubs, everything. They are quick to criticize, quick to claim that somehow intolerance or racism must be behind what you're saying. So it takes bravery. It takes amazing bravery to say, I'm not going to just be silenced because of name calling that may occur. So I'm hoping moving forward that there is the ability and the willingness, I assume, at the school board to try to bring parents all together again and kind of say, look, we're one community. Talk about how you want, this is our last thing, because I know I said I'd let you go at a certain time, but you have plans, I assume, moving forward to try to build the cohesion and unity in your school district?
Well, those are the platforms that I ran on, was restoring trust with the community, increasing transparency between the district and the school board with the community, and really elevating the engagement of our board with this supervision of the district. And so we do have plans to try and bring everybody together. We are all dragons, and that's why people move to Southlake, because they love the unity of our school district. They really do, and that's why they move here. And so we have to get back to that. We're all dragons, and we're all in this together, and we really all care deeply about our kids. And so how can we move forward, and what is that path forward? And I think a lot of it just involves listening and being empathetic and making sure that our administration takes seriously those cases that are brought to it where kids are feeling unsafe, and making sure that we restore that trust. And that's what I'm willing to do, and that's why I'm on the school board.
Hannah Smith, I thank you again for running, for joining me today. Just great talking with you. Congratulations on your win, and thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I tell you, friends, we have this next guest joining us, and while we are transitioning to him coming in the studio, I sent to Matt the Wonderful a little clip, a montage of hilarious statements made by Republican Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana. He's becoming the king of quips in Washington. So while we're playing that, you'll love his little quips when we bring our next guest in studio, Barry Warnick.
The American people are thinking right now, Mr. President, they're thinking that this country was founded by geniuses, but it's being run by a bunch of idiots.
Senator, are you celebrating the greatest progressive bill in the history of our country?
Well, I voted against it, Brian. President Biden says it's a coronavirus bill, and my response is right, and the stripper really likes you. I stand before you tonight as a proud deplorable. I try to speak plainly so that my constituents who don't follow the nuances of government like I do, because they're too busy earning a real living, can understand the issues before me.
Kennedy is quickly becoming one of the most quoted lawmakers in Congress.
This stuff is why the aliens won't talk to us. I mean, it's absurd. When everybody's unhappy in Washington, a lot of folks across America are very happy.
Right.
And Washington doesn't understand. It says it does, but a lot of people in Washington don't understand that the rest of America laughs at us. They think this whole place is just dysfunction junction. You know what the American people are thinking right now? They're thinking that the brain is an amazing organ. It starts working in a mother's womb, and it doesn't stop working until you get elected to Congress. There are no democracies in the Middle East, with the exception of Israel. I trust, with the exception of Israel, I trust every Middle Eastern country about as much as I trust gas station sushi.
Okay, I have been waiting for the longest time to play some little clips by that Senator John Kennedy. He is so funny. Gas station sushi, great line. And on that note, we'll switch back to being serious again. I said at the start of the show I would have joining us in studio a gentleman who is running for Dallas City Council. He's actually now in a runoff. We just had, as I keep mentioning, we had our elections this past Saturday, May 1st. He's in a runoff for District 11, Barry Wernick. And one reason I wanted to have him in here is because we have in Dallas these kind of issues that are all over the country, the same kind of issues people are facing. We have in Dallas, astonishingly, a city council seemingly willing to at least partially defund the police, which I know all of you, we have listeners around the country, and some of you are thinking, that's something you think happens in California, but not Texas. You'd be wrong. It happens here in Texas. And we also have in the Dallas area a very large and growing homeless encampment in a very popular area, an intersection where many people have to go by almost every day. That's growing, seemingly no responsible response from our city government. So these are kinds of issues that we have here in Texas and elsewhere. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my friend and candidate for City Council, Barry Wernick.
All right, well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I watch the show all the time. And
oh, yay.
A little plug. But no, I do, and I really enjoy what you have to say, and you just get so much in such short time.
This is because I grew up in New York, I can speak quickly. That's why. But
okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
All right, I'll try to catch up with you then.
Okay.
All right. Now, I'm from Dallas, so we'll this is fast for us here, right?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so I do want to just, first of all, I love that you're running. I think it's an amazing thing for someone, especially you're a lawyer, you have lots of things you could be doing with your life. Why in the world would you run for city council?
Well, I love this city. I love my family. And I grew up here, and I worked all over the world. I worked all over the U.S. All the great cities, or cities that were once great.
Yeah.
And, it was 13 years ago I moved back to settle down, find my Texas girl, which I found, and raise a family in the greatest city I knew. And 10 years ago, everything was going great, because it took a few years. 10 years ago, I married my wife, and we started having children, and, well, Dallas was one of the safest cities in the country. At the time, we were adding 200 police officers to our force every year. And every year we did that, crime was going down. And I'm telling you, I thought this is everything I had ever dreamed of. I'm back at home, back in Dallas, have my wife, have my children, everything's going in the right direction. Our budget was $2 billion at the time. Now, 10 years later, today, our budget is $4 billion. So we've doubled the budget. How many more police officers do you think we have?
I'm not going to guess.
Well, we have about 1,000 less police officers.
Than we had 10 years ago.
Than we had 10 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
This is unacceptable. It shows where the priorities are of our city council. And last summer was really the first time I actually started looking at city leadership and looking at, well, how important is that? Well, it's really important. Look around the country. right? You look at Portland, Seattle, San Francisco, Chicago, Detroit, Minneapolis. I can keep on going on. A lot of these once great cities, I mean, incredible cities, some of them I've lived in and enjoyed, literally burning themselves to the ground. And it wasn't the federal government, and it wasn't the state. It was city leaders. It was city councilmen that were making these decisions. They were either sitting back justifying the violence by not saying anything, or actually endorsing it by coming out with comments like "no justice, no peace," or "tell the police to stand down."
Yeah.
That's disgusting. I'm an attorney. I'm also a mediator. And that's what I've devoted my practice to the last decade, is mediation. There is never a time in a civil society to justify violence. And that's what all these leaders were doing. And that's what they were doing. I was amazed. In Dallas, Texas, 11 out of the 14 city councilmen voted to defund the police.
I want to jump on and ask about that, because I know another candidate made the argument about defunding the police, and someone from the media was saying, well, that wasn't exactly defunding. You're uninformed. Tell me what they did.
No, they took $7 million out of the overtime pay, and that was after negotiating over and over and over again. I mean, it was my city council person was actually the one authoring the amendments, and they got down to $7 million of defunding the police. And they actually did defund the police. They start saying things like reallocate. Well, we reallocated.
Oh, that's very different, reallocated.
Right.
You know?
Well, when you're dealing with a theater at Bishop Arts Theater and spending $100,000 over there, that isn't really reallocating to anything to public safety.
Right.
Or a electric car study. That's not really allocating to public safety. What the result was when we defunded the police was, number one, as of April, we've already gone through our whole police overtime budget, okay?
For all of 2021.
So the police overtime budget has been, right, we've gone through it. Number two, our property crime had doubled. Now, Dallas's property crime rate is worse than Chicago's. And third, our murder rate.
Yeah.
So last year, we had the most murders ever since 15 years prior. Okay, the most murders. This is during COVID, by the way. People are at home.
Yeah, most people are home, yeah.
Right. We had the most murders in Dallas. Now, this year, after we defunded the police, murders have gone up 33%. So Dallas, at one time, was one of the safest cities in the country. Now, Dallas, well, 95% of the cities in this country are safer than Dallas. It's unbelievable.
My gosh,
How can I
that.
sit back? Now, I'm not a politician. I've never been in city government. But when I saw what was out there and who was running, basically more of the same, hand-picked successor to our current councilwoman, she's been sitting on the city planning commission for the last 6.5 years, I thought there's no way I'm going to let her win. And my wife said, you better stop complaining, step up and do something about it.
Good for her.
And she said, otherwise, you do something now, otherwise we're moving to the country. And my kids were like, well, do we get a horse? And I was like, oh.
Yeah.
And it sounded nice. But no, what's great about Dallas is it's an international city. There are 57 different languages spoken here. You've got arts and culture and everything, things that everyone should have. And this was what was wonderful about Dallas. An international city, but had that country vibe, that country feel, where you knew your neighbors and you said hello and you didn't have to ride your bike home before dark. In fact, you could have your kids play out in the front yard and not worry about it. But now we don't have enough police officers, not only not to answer a domestic violence call, we don't have enough police officers to handle what is now number one, where Dallas has made it number one, and that is human trafficking and sex trade. It's a $100 million a year industry in Dallas. How can we expect the police to actually address that issue? They can't address the minor ones. We don't have beat cops anymore that have their own neighborhoods. They're running all over town. There just aren't enough police officers.
Yeah, well, you know the anecdotal stories about not enough police officers. You'll hear many people telling stories about, you know, they came home in the evening, their house had been robbed. They call the police and they get, well, I mean, maybe several hours later, finally someone comes, or people calling, complaining about drag racing on streets not too far from where I live, and they call the police and they say we sat and waited, they just never came. And so things are changing. I know I committed to a quick time thing. I want to be sure we hit the other big issue that is really problematic in Dallas. So I mentioned when I was introducing you, but we've now had homeless encampments. We had a discussion in the show on Saturday about in Austin how the voters in the city of Austin finally said, they changed the city council, overruled their city council, and said, we're going to go back to where it's actually not legal to camp on public property, to set up your tent, sleep out in public, which Austin had become. It was on the way to becoming like San Francisco. I mean, just a homeless squalor everywhere. Well, Dallas has, which is often viewed as a conservative alternative to Austin, and we didn't have this problem until recently. Now we do, and I'll tell you, I read all sorts of local commentary by people, and so you have people saying, I can't drive my normal route to go to work or wherever they go, and there's a massive homeless encampment. There's all sorts of unpleasant, inappropriate behavior on the part of some of these people, and you hear some people saying, can't you clear them out? And other people saying, but where do they go? A lot of them are clearly not mentally healthy, they have other issues. So, and it's a struggle because people do still have a heart, even though they want to have Dallas. We want to stop the seeming growth of homeless squalor everywhere. So what's the answer? That's the biggest question of all.
That is. It's been one of my priorities since day one. I've had the same priorities, by the way, in my campaign from the day I started. Why? Because my opponents didn't have any priorities. They just wanted to continue with the same. One of them was public safety. I earned the endorsement of the Dallas Police Association. They trust me. They gave me the endorsement, not my opponent. When it comes to homelessness, this is an issue from day one that I've been addressing and consulting with experts. Ron Hall, who wrote the book, it's Life Story.
Same kind of different as me.
That's
Yep.
it. So if you've read the book or even seen the movie,
Both.
okay. This is his story, and it's true. And these are the people as city councilmen, when I'm a city councilman, that I'll be consulting with. Ron Hall has endorsed me. I'm the only one that has an actual expert, philanthropist, on the subject of homelessness to endorse someone. He endorsed me. Why? Because I understand this. I volunteer with homeless people. I actually have homeless people that have my cell phone number and they call me. When I get a call from Quick Trip, I know that's Vincent. If I get a call from Whole Foods, I know that's King. I mean, I know these guys. We talk. And I asked them what Ron brought up to me. He said, look, we can solve 50% of the homelessness. And how do you do that? Well, it won't cost Dallas a dime. See, the last 3 years, we set up this Office of Homelessness Solutions where $12 million of taxpayer money every year is going to this.
The city did this.
The city did this.
Okay.
Why? To look good. So people think, oh, well, they're doing something.
We have an office.
Right, and now I can, get reelected because I'm doing something. Well, $36 million later, 3 years later, $36 million our money, not the government's money. Where's our homelessness situation? Well, it's gone up 50%. We are now number one in Texas. So you talk about Austin, Dallas is now number one.
Yeah.
We went from 3,000 to 4,500. Ron Hall and I were talking, and he said, look, you get 50% of the homeless people who you don't have to throw them in the East River. That's a reference you might understand. But we don't have an East River here, I guess. But no. Throw them out of here. No, that's not the way to do it. You've got charitable organizations, organizations of faith, organizations I work with, who work with these good people who don't want to be put in a hotel, in a shelter, anywhere. They want to live outside. That's where they want to be. And we've got parks and locations, land that we own in Dallas, and I talked to Vincent the other day, and he said, when are you going to be able, when can I go to my Woodstock? Because you could take 50 acres. And instead of us saying, go there, they will gladly go there and get off the streets. They don't want to be on the highways. And Darren Babcock had done a great experiment in South Dallas, and it's working great. It's called Bonton Farms. Tiny homes with a little restroom. Now, we don't have to pay for that.
Yeah.
Ron Hall has raised hundreds of millions of dollars from people that care, because people are good. We care. And asked Vincent, we could get you a tiny home. Maybe we set that up and create a charitable organization to do this. People that know how to implement things. I mean, when does government ever implement anything really successfully?
Yeah.
But when do organizations of faith, nonprofits, even for-profit, just people, just good people, doctors, top doctors come out and actually help with solutions.
Yep.
They actually make a difference and actually have an impact. And you could have a place where they could, similar to Bonton Farms, out in I'll give you one example in Dallas. There's a Samuel Farms, which is out in East Dallas. Why not? Check it out. It doesn't have to be there. It's just an example of one of the places with hundreds of acres that we own. They would go there. You get a tiny home, your own restroom, a communal kitchen, and maybe actually some training. Now, obviously, this isn't for the drug addicted. This isn't for the mentally ill. But not everyone on the streets are.
Yeah, the most amazing thing I'll tell you, in one of the recent big freeze we had, which if you're not in Texas, you know we had this massive big freeze. So a friend of mine told me that she has an uncle who's homeless, and he likes being homeless. He doesn't want to live inside. And he called her to say, you know what, I'm going to freeze out here. So she went and picked him up. She brought him to her house. She let him get showered, washed his clothes, got him a good meal. He stayed through the great freeze. But the moment it warmed up, he said, I want to go back out. And he went back out to the homeless area, which I mean, it's unfathomable to most people. So, but to her, she said, hey, you know, he's not hurting anybody. He's not committing crime. And for whatever reasons he has, and he's not, she would say he's not mentally ill. He's not addicted to drugs. He just doesn't, he'd rather live outside. I think it's astonishing, but
he doesn't want the rules of society. You know, they want to do their own thing, but still, are they breaking the law? Now, if someone's breaking the law, we need to catch them in the act, put them in jail, and not for the night, especially if they're drug addicted. Put them in the jail for what? 10 days, maybe 14 days till they dry out, and then we've got county resources that should be there to address
to deal with drug addiction,
city
alcoholism.
drug addiction, and the mental illness too. That's not a city issue. There are a lot of things when you look at our city budget, what we're spending on just to look good for the voters, like we're doing something. And no, like, I mean, I'll give you little things like senior ride. Well, senior ride should be a DART issue, right? We give DART $300 million a year, over $300 million. They should be paying for that. But maybe if makes city council person look good if, well, city's doing this. City's paying for senior rides. It's a great program, but not for us to do. Senior dental. That's a county issue. There are all these things. We have human resources departments in every department in our city. We could cut it down to one human resource department. Maybe that would be a way to save money. There are a lot of ways that we can fund our public safety and also not throw things at problems that really Dallas, the city, should be involved in, like homelessness. I mean, we already have resources for that.
Yeah.
And people out there that want to help. So
that was thrilling here. So Barry Wernick, you're running for city council at District 11. I know your website because I looked it up. Wernick, WERNICK, the word for FOR, Dallas.com, WernickForDallas.com. When is the runoff?
So the runoff is May 24th, and it goes through May 30th. Then Memorial Day, there's no voting. Then it continues on June 1st, and that's the early voting. And then the actual election day is Saturday, June 5th. And please get out there and vote. Go to WernickForDallas.com. If you can donate to my campaign, that would be great. It really is time to, well, we don't have any more time for having more of the same. It's time for new leadership. It's time for conservative leadership. And I am the one. So let's bring some sanity back to Dallas City Council, and let's make Dallas safe and strong again.
Great ending. Thank you so very much for coming in, joining me today. Thanks for coming.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm really excited. Thank you.
Okay, folks, I have one last quick story today, and I will tell you then we're going to wrap up. So I captioned it, want to meet Marjorie Taylor Greene. If you're thinking, how come I know that name? She's a member of Congress, and she's from, I think it's Georgia. Yeah, member of Congress from Georgia. She is one where she got a really bad rap in the media. When she got to Washington, the Democrats actually voted in the Congress. Here are her constituents elected her. She's in Congress, and the members of Congress kind of ganged up on her and voted to remove her from all committees. And so you think, well, she must be really wild. Well, she's really not at all. My husband and I were in Florida last weekend. We got a chance to meet her and talk to her. Honest to goodness, you would invite her for Thanksgiving dinner. She's the nicest, down-to-earth, mainstream, Main Street America. She's rock-solid conservative. And she's joining me tomorrow on our Members Only Thursday show. It is not too late to join Members Only for tomorrow. When you go to americacanwetalk.org, it's on the home page. You hit that Members tab, you hit Join. It's very inexpensive. It's $5 a month and $50 a year, and you'll be able to tune in tomorrow live. Our Thursday shows only go out on our website, americacanwetalk.org, and they only go out to members. And once you're a member, you can watch all the past amazingly wonderful interviews we've done already on our members program. Love to have you join. And Marjorie Taylor Greene is a fabulous, you'd be proud to have her representing. And by the way, she'll tell you more about it tomorrow. But she is not using the fact that she was removed from her committees to kind of wallow. She is so active on the floor and doing all sorts of things as a member of Congress she's allowed to do. I'm thinking the Democrats are kind of wishing, dang, we should have kept her on the committees, because then she'd be too busy to be doing the things she's doing on the floor. She's forcing floor votes on significant issues, which is one of the many things she can do because she doesn't have to be at committee meetings anymore. So join America Can We Talk. Love to have you do that. And it is just a great way to have more conversations. I'll tell you very quickly, if you're on this, you're going to do this tomorrow. If you're a member, you can email me questions ahead of time. This is a Q&A. The whole thing is a Q&A between me and her and the studio audience. We have a small studio audience. You can ask questions. If you want to submit a question, email it to me at americacanwetalk@gmail.com. Put in the subject line, question for Thursday's show, and then you can put anything you want to put. Ask her whatever you want to ask her. She loves answering questions. She's the most forthcoming, open, and honest goodness kind of fun person. So it'll be very fun tomorrow to have her on the Thursday Members Show. I hope you will join. I wrap up every show by telling you why the stories we talked about today matter to you. So we start our show today, very beginning, some race discrimination okay? The answer is no, by the way. But academia and some parts of corporate America are following critical race theory, reintroducing segregation of people for purposes of training and education. CRT makes race the defining characteristic of who you are, including how you should think. CRT is critical to the radical left agenda. It springs from a godless view of mankind. Critical race theory is anti-American and antithetical to all men and women created equal by God. Once Americans understand critical race theory, they overwhelmingly reject it. Spread the word about the evil of critical race theory. I should remind you, as our listeners, I do not ever do slides why it matters for our guests, because I don't know what they're going to say. So I'm just going to wrap up with what I said, encouraging you to try to join me tomorrow as a member and meet Marjorie Taylor Greene. She is demonized and smeared for her traditional conservative pro-American worldview. She's blackballed by the Beltway ruling class, banned from House committee assignments, and I've met her. She's hardworking, common sense, heartland values American, now serving in Congress. So why is she demonized and smeared? Is she actually feared by the left? How does she persevere? You can ask her those things and more. Learn more tomorrow, Thursday, May 6th, on our America Can We Talk members only show. She will be live with me on Skype. And that, my very fine friends, is America Can We Talk for today. Thank you so much for tuning in every Monday through Thursday at 3 p.m. Central Time to America Can We Talk, where I always talk truth about America because America matters. And I'll talk to you next time.
America Can We Talk? Truth about America.